Welcome back. In this video, we're going to learn how to create client types. In the previous video, we'll learn about how to create a game sequence, but the game sequence itself was empty. The client types actually say what is happening in each of those steps and stages. The client types live inside the game/client types folder, and there are different files depending on the purpose of the client type. Who is gonna play it as that client type? Is that a human? Is that with a web browser? In that case, we look at player.js. If it is a bot, on the server would be bot, and so on. We want to look at player and logic. We're gonna first look at the player. First thing we're going to learn about the player client type is that it's code which is executed on the client, usually web browser. However, it is packaged together when still it is on the server. So some code, it is server related, and some code is just available for the browser. Understanding which code is available at what point of the program, it is key to program a client type. So here I'm in Atom. I've opened the player.js client type in the Ultimatum game. So I have the linter installed, which is highlighting some objects here, saying that this ngc is assigned a value but never used. So it's complaining. Well, we don't care. Just ignore those warnings, because these are here for reference, for you to know that those objects exist in case you need them. If you have done the exercises, you know that you can define variables either with the let variable or with the var variable, and that you should use the var variable only in the browser because you want to maximize the compatibility of the browsers. There is a very good compatibility also with the let variable, but you want to have 100%. So this code, since use the let variable, means which is executed on the server. So you know that because it's the content of the export function, and it's something which is used in here, but it's not yet sent back to the client. So this object known as quitText, it is defined with the curly brackets and contains a number of properties which are divided by a colon to the value of the property itself. So you know that the empty space here doesn't matter. You could have more empty space like this, no empty space at all. As long as there is a comma here separating the properties of the object, you are doing fine. Let's go back like this. In this case, this property, how much text, is a string. In this case, how much choice it is an array. You know that because there's a square brackets here. So this code in here contains some values of some properties that we need later on in the client type, but it's not yet the client type itself. To define a client type, you need to use the stager object, which is sent inside this function as an input parameter of the export function. Here it is. So we're going to use this object to define the client type. There are some methods like setOnInit, which creates a function which executed only once when the game starts. And then there are functions like extendStep or extendStage. We're going to see what they do. So I just show you that the stager is a property that is received by the client type. Another one is the settings. The settings comes from the game settings. The stager is coming from the game stages. And the waiting room takes them both and gives them to the player client type, depending on the treatment that is chosen by the waiting room. So here we have as input parameter the treatment name, which is what the waiting room has chosen, the correct settings which belong to the treatment, the stager which creates the client type, and a couple of extra objects which we don't use right now. So there are three main functions, so the setOnInit and the extendStage and extendStep. What you put in extendStage must match the name of the stage that you create in the game, those stages, the sequence. What you put on extendStep is the ID, that's the name of the step, which is inside one of the stages. The second parameter here is an object which contains the step property that you want to extend. It's a general rule. What you define at the level of the stage is valid for all the steps which are nested inside the stage. So in this case, the foobar is available in the bidder step, but however, the bidder step is overriding, giving it a different value. In the respondent step inside the ultimatum stage, it will still contain the bar value. Two important properties are the frame property, which define which file is loaded in the main frame. So usually it's an HTML file, but it could also be a view. And the other important property is the callback property, which defines what's actually happening after the frame is loaded. So let's have a look at both of them very briefly. Starting from the select language step. So there is a frame which says the language selection page should be loaded in here. Where is this file? Is it in public? And in this case, it's inside the English folder, because this game uses a language selection widget, but otherwise would be immediately inside public. So what this is doing, it says, please load the language selection frame, and as soon as it's loaded, append this widget up on it. So the node.widgets method is one of the methods available through the node object. The widgets is a collection of reusable components that in this case can, for example, display a language selector, or could display another widget to measure risk attitudes, or just a timer, or for example something to draw on a page or whatever. There is a list of widgets available on the wiki, and you can check the name of the widgets. By changing this first parameter, you would change what widget is loaded. The second parameter here is where you want to load it, where you want to append it. In this case, it is in the body. We will see more about this in a second. Here is a very bird eye overview of what properties and objects you have available in the callback function. So these are standard JavaScript objects, for example, the document or the location or the alert. Some are the NodeGame objects. We've seen the node and the node.widgets collection, but there are also other objects. For example, the W object stands for window, is manipulating the graphical interface. And there's the J, it stands for JS utils or JSUS. It is a collection of helping function to, for example, generate random numbers to create arrays of a certain type. Let's have a look, try to understand a bit more why we're using this type of syntax. Okay, so we're using the w.getFrameDocument.body. So this is a complex statement, we need to understand it. So this is how the interface look like. So there is a header and there is a frame. Here's the header containing a number of widgets, and here is the frame. Both are created at initialization. So here's the init function. What it does is creating the header with this command, and it's assigning a value to the variable which we define above here. So we're using the var statement. And we also generated the frame. In this case, we don't store it because you're not going to reuse it. We stored the header here so we can reuse it in the node_widgets.append command. So we're going to say we're going to append the visual round right here in the header. And the third parameter is an optional object, contains configuration object for the configuration options for the widget. You can try what these changes do to the widget. Just change what is displayed, if the total number of rounds, up or down counting, and so on. Then we had the timer, the done button, And we have some other commands here, which are functions which are executed if, to respond to events. We will know more about this later. This is a command which is used to set a language. This is some kind of specific for this type of game, so it's not common to all the games. We don't investigate that too much in here. This frame here, it is an HTML page inside the HTML page. So there is the main page, and there is an iframe. The iframe is a special HTML tag which defines a new page. And in this way, we have the main HTML page, which contains the node object, the NodeGame object, which lives up here and manipulates what's happening in here. So say at the level of the header, there is a node object, and whenever the new step or stage begins, something is loading in here, and the new callback function is executed to say what actually we should take care of in that page. So let's have a try here to do a modification to that page. We're going to change the language selection widget into an SVO gauge widget. Let's go here. We changed language selector into SVO gauge, and we restart the server. Here we push play, and we start with a select with an SVO gauge here instead of the language selection widget. The SVO is a measurement for the social value orientation of a participant. So to say, if I decide certain option here, it means there might be more or less altruist versus egoist. So this is how to divide a certain amount of money between me and another participant. So it works. So we changed the select language here into another widget, but we can do more. Let's see what the slides suggest us to do. Oh yes, it suggests that this is not appropriate anymore, the select language title, so we just change it into the HTML page. Just change it to SVO measurement. Since we modified the HTML page, we don't need to reload the server. We can just refresh the page, and if it's not cached by the browser, we'll have the appropriate statement here. Yes. We can do even something more interesting, which is a treatment dependent change. So for example, we might want to display a certain text depending on the treatment. This is very useful if you do a manipulation which is psychological, if you have a framing effect. In this case, we're going to change something. We will have a welcoming message, a salutation, which will be informal, hi there, or formal, good evening, mister. To do so, we need to add these properties to the settings, to the game.settings file. Just remember to add the comma, have a salutation here, and you write, I don't remember what it was, but let's just say hello there, and here don't forget the comma, salutation, good evening, sir. It's important that you use the same variable name, because this is what you want to access in the player.js client type. So let's get a variable name salutation, which wants to take that object from the settings.salutation. So you see the settings object is coming from here, but and it's coming from here, but this is exactly what the waiting room decided for the treatment. It decided the treatments, and the treatment contains the settings that we just defined. Now you will see that while this in principle it is correct, it is actually going to create an error. But let's continue for the moment. So the next thing we want to do is to put that string inside an element in the page. So that element does not exist yet, so we should create it in here. One common HTML element is called the div, which just means division. It creates some space on the page. You give it an ID, salutation, you can call it however you want, and then you make it empty, you just close it. You close it by repeating the same div, but this time you had a backward slash in here. It's empty, so you'll see that most HTML tags have an opening and a closing tag, but not all of them. For example, the link tag is opens and closed with itself. So now we have a tag here which we can get from in here. So we use the element, the method from the window. So we can use the shorthand command for get element by ID, which is window.get get element by ID, and the ID we use was salutation. Now we can set something inside we should define it here, div. We can put salutation inside the div. How do we do that? So div is exactly an object like any other object you have in JavaScript. So you create and access properties with the dot operator. So div dot, there is a number of pre-existing properties created by JavaScript and the browser. One of those is the inner HTML property, which basically says whatever is inside that div. And we're going to put the salutation here. So as I said, this will create an error, but it's useful to know why and how we can detect that there is an error. I'm going to restart the server, refresh the page. So now there is an error and you see that the game is stuck. So if you're in such a situation, you should look at the JavaScript console immediately. You can do that by inspect or by pressing Ctrl+Shift+I. Make it smaller, so there is some red text, which means there's an error. It says settings is not defined. So this is fundamental to understand why this is creating an error. Setting, it exists in the setting exists in the server because it comes in here, but this file here is actually creating a package which is sent to the browser over the internet. In the process of sending it, the reference to this object, which is defined up here, is lost. So you need to create, you need to use the corresponding element in the browser, which is instead stored under node.game.settings. So node.game.settings. You will see that this object is actually existing over here, node.game.settings. I want to use that one. I updated the code here already. I can simply refresh, I can simply restart the server and refresh the browser, and hopefully we won't get that nasty error anymore. Here we go, we are hello there. And we are one of the treatments, so if you refresh, we should get into the other treatment. Let's see if we get the other treatment now. Yes, we are into the other treatment. It says good evening, sir. And as long as we refresh, we're going to be assigned two treatments in a sequence. We're going to have the two strings up here. So it looks a bit ugly. We could do a bit better to format that string, and we can do that again in here. For example, we could have a break-in element, create some space here. But even better, we should create a CSS class to style this element. We will not look into CSS styling in this video, so we just do the simple way with a break-in statement here, and by combining some HTML tag here. So the strong tag will make it bold, and we'll see that we are also concatenating some strings here. So I surrounded the salutation with two other HTML tags, and I'm combining these together in one string. Everything is going inside the inner HTML in here. Let's try it. In this case, I need to restart the server, and you see, nicely styled. Last thing I want to show you is that this can actually be done with one-liner using another method. The set inner HTML method from the window object. So you just use the ID of the element, and then you use the second parameters like this. And still delete the thing you don't need, and it will still will work. Don't forget semicolons. Semicolons aren't actually necessary, but they can create some errors, so it's a good coding practice to always add them.